Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Thursday, August 21st. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we'll get to some baseball news you should know, including some updates on Shohei Ohtani, Zach Neto, and Kyle Tucker. Rob Manfred spoke over the weekend, actually on Sunday, during the game in Williamsport, talking about expansion and realignment. We'll dissect a few of those comments and look at some of the proposals, including a really interesting one from Stephen Nesbitt of The Athletic that I think makes an awful lot of sense if the league is in fact going to go to 32 teams and realign some things along the way. Got a few things you may have missed in recent days as well, like the Royals creeping their way toward a playoff berth this year. Just 2.5 back entering play on Thursday. So let's get into it, Eno. We saw Shohei Ohtani leave early on Wednesday with a thigh bruise after getting hit by a comebacker. Took a few innings for that to swell up to the point where he had to leave. They have a planned day off for him Thursday. It's back likely on Friday against the Padres. So all things considered, it looks like this is a minor issue as far as the performance on the mound. This is at Coors Field. 4 innings pitched, 5 earned, 9 hits, 3 Ks, no walks, season high, 20 batters faced. I think of all of the stats from Wednesday's outing, that one is the most important because it's still another nudge closer to Ohtani getting that regular starter usage. And I think we're sort of at that level. We talked about it last time he pitched. He's likely pitching deep enough into a game any given day to be eligible for a win. Going to be still on the shorter side. You're not going to see 7 or 8 from him probably at all in the regular season. Probably wouldn't see that in the playoffs either. But I started thinking about this more from the perspective of Ohtani in leagues where he's only a pitcher for 2026, right? They've had this progressive buildup. The skills look pretty good. Wednesday was a little bump in the road, but it's at Coors. Like, it is what it is. What do you think about Ohtani's outlook on the mound for next season based on how the stuff has looked so far in his return to pitching in 2025?
It's really excellent, and his locations have been better than they've been in the past even, so that's pretty amazing. I think it has a little bit to do with pitch mix. Like I said, he doesn't command the splitter that well, and he hasn't been throwing it as much, but maybe that's just what he does. Maybe going forward, he's more fastball slider with the occasional splitter as opposed to relying on it. Either way, he's survived and thrived with poor location numbers in the past. I think this is just a good sign that he's not coming back, not able to throw the slider like some pitchers, or, there's all of his pitches have come back online. Pretty much all of his stuff has come back online. He was a 119, 122 stuff plus in 22 and 23. This year he's a 118. So I feel like everything's there. All the pitchers are there. This is the best walk rate he's shown. The K rate is there. I think you can only probably put him down for maybe like 130 innings. It would be a big jump over this year, but he's cleared 130 innings in 21, 22, and 23. So if you want to regress it a little bit and say, all right, 120 innings. So 120 innings of what Oopsie says will be a 3.06 ERA next year. I think it's very close to a Tyler Glasnowian situation where it's hard to make that guy your ace because that's a lot of risk you're taking on. But if you've already taken another pitcher and he's your second pitcher, I mean, that's a pretty interesting thing. I think I would be really tempted to take to do a kind of a high floor, lower ace plus Ohtani, like a Fromber Ohtani connection next year would, I think, be pretty powerful.
That's pretty interesting. And there's still leagues that will let you have Ohtani as one player where a lot of leagues are like this. You have to choose hitter versus pitcher. You have daily moves, you have weekly moves, all these variations that fluctuate his value. I think in just about every format, he's still tracking to be the number 1 pick in fantasy. I mean, even while rehabbing his way back as a pitcher this year, Shohei Ohtani's already popped 44 homers. He's hitting 285. He's got a 393 OBP. The hard hit rate's still up at 57.9%. He's doing that Aaron Judge thing where he's got a barrel rate that starts with a 2, but also has 2 digits before the decimal place. So 21.7% there. The one thing we thought would taper off after the shoulder injury he suffered in the postseason last year, stolen bases, they've tapered off, but they haven't gone away completely. He's 17 for 23 through 125 games, so he's probably going to get to the 20 bag range again. It just looks like the power of 2024 is something that he's legitimately got in the bag. The speed from 2023 is there, and the stuff is back to its pre-injury levels. It's just truly amazing to see this play out every time he takes the ball, every time he just jumps on the field to even just do his job as a DH.
At 31, I think you will regress some of these numbers and projections. So, I think it'll be something like a 280, 42 homer projection with 18 to 20 stolen bases. I think that's like a fairly stead projection because he's cleared all of those numbers in 4 of the last 5 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, that alone puts him up there puts him right there next to Judge as a batter alone. I think it'd be a fair question between those two. I do wonder where Judge's head. I wouldn't be surprised with his offseason surgery. That makes Ohtani like even more of a number one. And then if you have the option of using him, even if you don't use it most weeks, I think that adds a little something. It's a little bit like a multiple position guy, right? Like if you have a multiple position guy who's available at second base, you're probably going to play him at second base all the time, but there's still some value in the other positions that are available to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how you'd have to think about Ohtani. And we've talked about that being worth $1, $2 in auction, whatever it is. That's enough to put Ohtani into number one. So yeah, really exciting player. I think, if I had to sort of guesstimate, I'd probably see him around 15, 16, 17 in my rankings next year. It'll be once I've run out of pitchers where I don't really have any question marks, he'll be the first pitcher with a question mark, Yeah.
The most exciting pitcher with a big question mark. That's how you rank Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher only. But again, a lot of leagues do let you have him as both. You just got to make that choice at each possible lineup interval. And if you're in a format that lets you count all the stats from the UT spot, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I think, I have a daily league where I don't think that the one thing that's not in any league, I think, is where you can play him as a batter and also get his pitching stats that day.
Like some leagues will give you a version of Ohtani that you have to put in the lineup as both. I mean, there's so many different combinations.
Yeah, Yahoo has Shohei hitter, Shohei pitcher.
Right.
Yeah, but then you've lost a roster spot, so that's an interesting one. But one thing is, I think this one looked like it hit the meat. It was good that he played. It played the meat of his thigh, whatever. Like, it didn't hit anything hard like a bone or anything. He played through it, which I think is a good sign. And so I think he'll be okay. He's, with the day off, it's totally baked in already. I think we won't see. You may see fewer stolen bases. We'll
sure.
see. He'll still end up pretty close to 20. And good news for him. Bad news for Landon Roop, who last night was hit by a comebacker. The comebacker, I don't think it necessarily hurt him. When you look at it, the comebacker stunned him, put him on his butt, and then he tried to get up to field the ball, and his leg collapsed. So we don't have full news on that yet. He's going back for imaging. He's definitely on the IL. They're calling it a knee sprain so far, but the speculation on the cast, and one that I agreed with, was that it looked like an ACL.
Yeah, we'll see if we get some good news on Landon Roop, but the early look at that is certainly not a good one. We started with the softball. I mean, talking about how good Ohtani is like the easiest thing you can do on a podcast. The news here, Zach Neto had x-rays on his wrist. Those came back negative, got hit by a pitch. So he's in the day-to-day category. Angels don't play Thursday. He's expected to be back on Friday. The season for Zach Neto's been better than I think anybody could have imagined when you remember that he was coming off of off-season shoulder surgery. Nobody was going to go out and detail the nature of the procedure. It did cost him time at the beginning of the season. He debuted on April 18th. So we spent most of the winter, at least I did, having a very pessimistic outlook for Neto because we didn't know when exactly he was coming back. And then we had questions about how much power he was going to show in his return. So when you look at what he's been able to accomplish, being the 45th ranked hitter in the Fangraphs Play Rater this season, that's with some lost time at the beginning of the year baked in already. And the quality of contact has gotten better for Zach Neto. That's not at all what I would have expected coming off of a shoulder injury, especially. If he had just held the level he's shown since debuting, an 8% barrel rate, near 40% hard hit rate, I would have been more than happy and even surprised by that, given the shoulder surgery. But 13.8% barrel rate, 46.8% hard hit rate. It's still an interesting profile. He looks like he's a 30-30 player in terms of the power speed combo. Where I think there's a little more variability is with the swing and miss, the lower walk rate, and not knowing what the slash line is actually going to look like alongside the impressive power speed combo.
It is funny to watch him too. He has that huge leg kick that he has quieted down a little bit, but he still is like really trying to spank the ball. You look at his spray charts, it is just all pull power. Like there's not really anything going to the opposite direction. And so, you can see that approach. The chase isn't bad, but he doesn't walk. He's aggressive. He's trying to hit the ball. When you put his comps up again, one of the things I thought going into this, and he's not going to show up on this list because I just looked at 23 and 24, wanted full seasons, is remember Paul DeYoung's seasons where he had like 5% walk rate, 30% strikeout rate? Any case, I took guys who had below a 7% walk rate and a worse than average K percentage and were qualified hitters in 23 and 24. And the comps line up pretty good. If you look at the average, the comps 5.4% walk rate, Neto this year 6%. The comps 27.4% strikeout rate, Neto this year 25.7%. So like that lines up pretty well. Neto hit this year is barreling the ball a little bit harder, but doesn't have the same bat speed or max EV as a lot of these guys, but has a better hard hit. So, this runs the gamut from, Ceddanne Rafaela and Zach Geloff and Ezequiel Tovar twice. So, that's where you get nervous, I think, some, because you're like, oh, he actually looks a lot like Ezequiel Tovar, except he hits the ball a little bit harder and he makes a little bit more contact than Tovar. On the top end, you have Julio Rodriguez and Teoscar Hernandez, but he doesn't really have the same bat speed as those guys. He doesn't really hit the ball as hard as those guys. Even Jake Berger has a 115 max EV compared to Zach Neto's 111. So where I really kind of zero in on comps, and these are not very exciting, I'm warning you, but I think it's still interesting. The comps are Brandon Drury, Logan O'Hoppe, Brendan Rodgers, Nick Castellanos, and 2023 JT Realmuto. I think those are decent comps. And what sticks out for me is a lot of these guys, the guys who play, elite positions like O'Hoppe and Realmuto, you think highly of them, right? Especially 2023 Realmuto. I know he's kind of fallen off since, but O'Hoppe, you think fairly highly of these guys. So Neto is he a shortstop? Now you go to the fielding run page. Out of 30 qualified shortstops, Neto is 24th in fielding runs valued. So he's down there with Jacob Wilson, Trey Sweeney. He's ahead of Carlos Correa, ahead of Crawford, Abrams. Bichette is at the bottom. So Bichette is older, and Bichette is going to be a second baseman. Maybe by the time Zach Neto becomes a free agent, he has a Bichettian case for free agency, right? He's going to transition to second base for you. Maybe he can play a year or two more of shortstop, but he's going to transition to second base for you. And he's going to have power and speed. The OBP will decline. It's not a person I want to give like a huge contract to, but it does seem someone that would be firmly comfortable in like the mid level, and which is largely, going away. But there are still people, I think, Swanson got a better deal because he's a better defender. So you have to go below Swanson. Who are middle infielders below Swanson that have signed deals recently?
I mean, Willie Adames always gets kind of lumped into that same kind of conversation for me.
That's an interesting one. I would I'd want to spend. I thought that, but I think the Adames deal is one of the worst ones out there right now.
I guess looking at some other historical players, thinking about contracts turning out differently than expected, like Marcus Semion's a few years ago, but that was the foundation, I think, on durability, and his defense got better during his time in the big leagues. I mean, there's always the possibility that Neto becomes a better defender or moves to a position and grades out more favorably there. And I think, as we pointed out, like the thing that makes him a little different than some of the comps, Neto runs, and he's an effective base stealer. So he does bring that facet to his game that keeps the value afloat. The other name that kind of popped into my head while we were talking about some of those guys on the list was, imagine Trevor Story playing the early part of his career not in Colorado. And I think you might see some similarities to Zach Neto. So that's a good player with
Story
health.
Signed at 29, a 6-year $140.
Yeah, that's a little closer to that Swanson Adames line, but I think Story as a hitter has similar risks to what Neto has, and similar ceiling too. I mean, I think there's lots of ways this can work, and all this is to say, like, there's a couple things in play. One, the Royals, I think, did well taking Neto where they did in the 2022 draft. They took him 13th overall. A few guys that went before him: Gavin Cross, 9 to the Royals; Gabriel Hughes, pitcher, 10 to the Rockies; Kevin Parada, 11 to the Mets; Jace Young to the Tigers. And there were some misses in that run up to him. Jacob Berry went 6th to the Marlins in that draft. And they got him to the big leagues quickly, and they've been right. And around this shoulder injury, he's been even better than expected. So I wouldn't be surprised if Neto is an easy top 50 player for a lot of people going into 2026. And I think I wanted to bring him up because it's kind of a question of, do you trust the floor enough to take him there? I definitely trust the power and speed. It's that slash line that would be the only thing that would give me a little bit of pause.
And I actually trust the floor. What I'm not sure is how much more there is, right?
Sure.
I mean, you would have to see. He did actually see some bat speed growth from last year to this year. Whether that is a function of counts or what he's seeing at the plate or whatever, but I would say it's probably some strength training they did coming back off of the surgery. But when you see that Maxi V and you see that barrel rate, they don't line up completely. So I could see the power taking a step back, and he's more of a 250, 2025 guy. But, that's still probably making the case for like the 6th best shortstop or something, 5th best shortstop.
Still a really good player, and a guy that's had a better 2025 than I think most of us could have imagined given the context with which it began. Let's talk about the big plans in Major League Baseball: expansion and realignment. Anytime you have a game at the place where the Little League World Series happens, you're thinking about like Little League Baseball, you should definitely bring Commissioner Manfred in to talk about business stuff. It's the exact right vibe for the situation, right? It's a perfect fit.
Man. Couldn't they find somebody in the commissioner's office or on that thing that Jed's on, that
Cap?
Yeah, Cap. Can they find somebody that was a Little League star? I mean, what's weird is that there are not that many. Like Michael Conforto is one of the few that was a Little League, World Series star and also made it to the big leagues. There's not a long list, but you gotta be able to find somebody that was like a little leaguer that can channel his inner little leagueness.
Yeah, I mean, look, Manfred is who he is. Like, it's fine. He's the commissioner. It's nice when he speaks at all, in the sense that at least we get some insight into what the league is thinking about.
That the media is going to take advantage of. Yes.
Of course. So I'd rather have it than not have it. It's just a funny setting for the business talk to take place when you got guys like sliding down the berm in the outfield. So he's on the broadcast Sunday night, and the couple of things that he brought up that people are still writing and talking about are expansion and realignment. Not a secret, not the first time this stuff has come up. And there's a thing that he keeps going back to about geographic realignment. He has this example that he's brought up multiple times of the Red Sox playing the Angels in the playoffs and it creating a problem because it's too late for the East Coast people and it's too early for the West Coast people when their team is at the other end of the country. So part of it seems like
that's not ever going to go away. It's the playoffs.
That's not ever going to go away unless, as part of expansion, you have the realignment in which you make it like other sports, where you have the teams that play in the East half and the West.
Stop happening in the regular season. Yes.
Well, but you could also dissolve the American and National League. So, do you think this is something the league would actually do? I feel like there are traditionalists out there who are like, you can't do that, and I'm kind of like, I'm pretty sure they can. Like, The leagues play by the same rules.
First of all, it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. They don't play by different rules. It's not. You go back to when those leagues were separate. There was a few reasons they were different. Those reasons have all been whittled away over time. So
you'd have to figure out something for the All-Star game. But you know what? The All-Star game is not something that needs to be at the forefront. Could you have like a world versus USA game, or could you have like sophomores versus rookies, like whatever? Do anything.
You could still do the East versus West thing though to get those teams that aren't seeing each other as much in what would be
just do East versus West
to see each other.
All-Star game.
Yeah. Other sports all do this, and it all works fine. And baseball's just different because of the American League National League thing that has been around for a while. And I'm not that attached to American and National League. I'm more on the side of saying, make it make sense.
I have a little bit of attachment. I mean, my first team was the Braves. I've lived in more NL cities. I've been a fan of more NL teams than AL. Like, I used to have this thing where it's like I root for this team first, and when they're out, I root for this team, and when they're out, I root for this league.
You got a hierarchy. You could still have that in the East-West plan, though. That won't go away.
That's true. I can still just root for the West.
Yeah, I think it still works. And so connected to this is this idea. They're almost certainly going to add 2 teams to the league at some point in the next, let's say, 10 years. Kind of hard to know when exactly it's going to happen. I think Manfred wants it sorted by the time he retires in 2029. Dude, you could have retired like 10 years ago if you wanted to, but hey, live your life. Anyway, we're getting closer to this being a reality. The other part of it, aside from the possible geographical realignment, is the possibility if you go to 32 teams, are you also expanding the playoff field? Are you going to say, we have 32 teams now, so if we left it alone, it'd be 12 out of 32. Right now, we're 12 out of 30. Or do you bump it up? Do you make it 14 out of 32 by having 7 teams where the best team has a bye or something? Or do you go up to 16 teams, which mirrors a lot of other sports that have 32 teams where half the league gets in? And I think that's where I start to get a little more bothered by changing even more. Like, I have enjoyed a lot of the tweaks they've made to the playoff formats in my lifetime. I think it was because I wasn't an adult when it was a much smaller playoff field. I'm not as attached to that. I've been an adult in the wild card era, and this seems like it's big enough where the regular season has already lost value. Like, we've seen that, and that's the truth. The more you keep flooding that postseason field with more teams, the less the regular season matters. Even if you shorten it up by 8 games to make the math work, say, okay, we're going to take away 8 regular season games, but we're going to add a round to the playoffs because of all these extra teams. I don't love that. I feel like we might get it anyway, but that's the one part of all of this that actually leaves me a little bit frustrated.
Yeah, because the one of the fundamental differences between baseball and other sports is just the length of the schedule. I mean, it's just something that is a truth that comes down to like why people play fantasy football more. It's easier to set lineups for 16 weeks than it is for 26 or whatever. Even if you do weekly lineups, and as a writer, like. I think the one thing that we have some solidarity with the players, and we don't have to be there as often as them, and we take more days off, and we don't get paid as well. But we have that solidarity. We're like, oh my god! Sometimes in September, you're just like, whoa, like there's still like this, and then there's that. There's still the postseason after this, And if you devalue the regular season too much, then you get a little bit of nihilism in the sport where it's just like, why do I care about this game in August? Like these, especially between 2 teams that aren't going to make the playoffs, it's like, oh God, why are we doing this? So I on the other end, if you let more people in, then you can have more games between teams that might still make it.
Right. You keep it alive for more teams. So I get why they have the conversation. The carrot for the league, of course, is more TV rights to sell. More money coming in, right?
And if you're cutting 8 regular season games, that's money you're cutting out. So you want to replace that somehow. You're going to get a big franchise fee. So, the 2 new franchises have to pay a big fee. But that, once that gets watered down, divided by 30, it's nice, but it's not, you don't want to give up 8 games in perpetuity for like a one-time lump sum payment. You know what I mean? Like if they're putting these things together. But if you save money on travel, you make the case that your players are going to be healthier because they're not traveling as much. And then I think you're going to have to add something for the playoffs. So I'm just hoping it's more like 2 rather than 4, because I find the first round of the basketball playoffs to just be unwatchable for the most part, and that there are bad teams in the basketball playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think once you get, like, if you think about letting in the 16th best team out of 32, there's also like variance around that. So their true talent could be under 500. Like, and actually, sometimes they will be under 500.
It does occasionally happen, and I don't love that. If they do expand the playoff field, I guess my hope would be that they stop it at 14 teams, because then the team with the best record in each conference or league, however they decide to split it up, that number 1 record would carry a little extra weight. You're still keeping some benefit from the regular season for the team that plays really well. They get that rest in the first round. Whereas if 16 teams make it and everyone plays right away, other than just being at home, you don't get that extra incentive, which I do think is worth having out there. I feel like that's a little something that just makes that long grind, worth it in the long run. Now, the who's and the where's, like, Manfred, of course, wasn't going to tip his hand on that. But Stephen Nesbitt, I thought, did a really good job at The Athletic trying to break down the different options. And in Nesbitt's plan, the realignment of the American League was going to include 1 expansion team, either Portland or Salt Lake City. Portland's been on the map for a long time for these conversations. Salt Lake City, I think, has become a bigger part of the conversation in the last 5 or 6 years. And then on the National League side, as he realigned it, he's got expansion to Nashville or Raleigh, which makes so much sense when you think about the amount of territory that Atlanta has its footprint in, and when you think about how big Nashville and Raleigh have become, right? Those are places that I think could very easily support professional teams. Like, that's not even a question for me.
When I did an analysis of expansion teams, it's a little bit old, but it was pretty thorough, because we looked at coverage of other fandoms. Like, for example, Braves. We looked at the Braves footprint in the South, and amazingly, it didn't cover Nashville and it did cover Raleigh. In terms of, I think we used like Google searches and maybe some, maybe it was like sales or something, like jersey sales. I don't know what it was, but we looked at sort of a footprint. And obviously the Mariners cover Portland to some extent. I didn't really study Salt Lake City, but I do remember a big deal for them is the size of the TV market. They're just trying to add more eyeballs and more TV money. And Raleigh and Portland were on the short list of better TV markets. Vegas was one of the worst markets for expansion that I found. But it did have that one asterisk of just a massive amounts of tourism dollars. That's really hard to kind of figure out how that's going to figure in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm willing to be like, okay, what if they're one of the worst TV markets, but they also have lots of visitors, like tourists from other countries, and you know what I mean? Like, there's still a chance that that's a good play. I think the Vegas play was a bad one, but I understand the tourism dollars. In any case, I would say if these are the 4, Portland and Raleigh would be my picks in terms of health of the industry around it, the number of people that could come to the games, the size of the TV market. And in this case, I think, one thing that I like about Nesbitt's is like the travel pops off the page. Mm-hmm. Like, you can see how you can reduce travel by a ton with this realignment. And the other thing that I like about Nesbitt's is he highlighted all the division and league changes. There's not that many.
No. Like, the most impacted team in the National League version, Atlanta would be the most impacted, because they would move into a new division with the Marlins, who they've been in a division with for a long time. The Rays could be a league change for the Rays, and then the expansion team. But that team's close to Atlanta, so that kind of makes sense. So
you give them the bone of like, hey, you get an expansion team. That's not bad.
It's like, yeah, you're losing something, but you're gaining this because the travel for everybody looks a lot better in this scenario. The new division on the American League side was to move Colorado into a division with both Houston and Texas, and then Kansas City would be a 4-team division. So then
I think that's keeping a lot of stuff, similar to, you're moving Texas and Houston out of the West. Yeah. But they're not really in the West.
Yeah. And I think where the East-West, like, bigger picture thing breaks down is that you don't necessarily have enough teams to cut it in half. You have to make a decision on all the teams in the middle of the country. Are you West or are you East? And that's what every sport has to do. So you end up with things
so this
like,
one keeps the American League and keeps the National League.
Yeah, this is probably the thing that's going to make the traditionalists the most happy of what I've seen so far. Like, if you love the American League and National League, like, the Nesbitt plan probably covers that about as well as you can.
Makes the fewest waves,
Mm-hmm. You still have a ton of rivalries that are still intact. Very, very few rivalries disrupted.
The biggest rivalry that I see disrupted is Braves Mets.
Yep.
You're taking Pittsburgh out of that, but it's like, do you list Pittsburgh Cardinals or Pittsburgh Cubs? Like, do you think of them as like one of the big rivalries in that division? You still keep Brewers, Cardinals, Cubs in the same. That's
and Reds
like the
all together.
Yeah, that's they hate each other the most. Like, they've been playing each other the longest, and you still keep Mets Phillies, which I think is a good rivalry. And you have the chance of creating a rivalry between the Braves and the new expansion team.
Yeah, for sure.
Where they're near each other. That's like sort of a battle for the South. I like the sort of Tampa and Miami being in there, the sort of the battle for Florida. You got some possibility of creating some intrigue down there. And then for the large part, you keep everybody where they are. The other part that we don't like about this, that I think you were talking about earlier, is this is 8 divisions.
Right. More divisions.
So all of a sudden you have to put 8 people in. And then it's kind of hard to be like, how do you put 8 people in? It's easy to be like, and then 8 wild cards. And they're like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do 8 wild cards. Please don't do that. But it's the fear that I have, because it does. It makes so much sense. Like, Giants, Dodgers, Padres, Diamondbacks, good. Brewers, right. Cardinals, Cubs, Reds, good. Mets, Phillies, Nats, Pirates, fine. That works for me. We talked about the new one, Nashville or Raleigh with Atlanta, Tampa, Miami, good. Seattle would be with one of the new teams.
Travel. It's crazy. And I think, you go to 154 games. And when you do that, you don't see people from the other league or the other divisions as much, which I think is good. Now, as a team, you might say, hey, we're Colorado. We actually like it when the Yankees come to town. We don't really, Colorado sells well. I don't know who's a good example of this. Somebody doesn't sell well, like Tampa or something. They love when New York comes to town, right?
Sure. Yeah. The lower attendance teams, sure. They'll always draw better.
Yankees will come to town every 4 years, every 3 years. Like, that might be a hard sell for some of the smaller markets that don't sell as well. They like having the big markets come from the East.
Right. When the Yankees, Cubs, Dodgers, Giants, teams with big footprints who travel well, when those teams go anywhere smaller, they tend to bring better numbers with them too. So, there are ways to make it work. I'm sure we're going to see dozens of different proposals and ideas. I thought Nesbitt did a nice job with this one.
It was just so like, this was like so.
It's so calm.
It was calm.
It was so logical. He didn't demo anything. He very carefully just restructured it in a way that was logical. Like, if I had to have a non-contractor redesign my house, Nesbitt's my first call. I'll be like, hey man, what do you think I should do here? And I think
he's not going to take the bathroom over here and put it over there.
No, we're going to end up with something that actually functions and makes sense. I think Commissioner Nesbitt.
I will have to say though that like baseball has been willing to do some weird stuff in the past. Like, I really remember the Braves being in the West.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Like, that was the weirdest thing when the Braves beat the Giants on the last day of the season. And they both had the Braves had 105 wins and Giants had 104 and didn't make the playoffs. That's that seems just like centuries ago.
The weird West could become a thing again. If the leagues are not preserved and they go to the East-West system, there will be some difficult decisions to make with those teams that play mostly in the central
like
time zone.
Cubs
Those
in
would be
the
ones.
West or something.
Yeah, and then, do you keep the Cubs and White Sox together, or do you split them and put one in the West and one in the East? Like, there's all, there's all sorts of iterations about that could be very unusual. So, yeah, more on the topic at some point, but felt like it was a good time to refresh where things stand amidst this comments from Rob Manfred earlier this week. A couple other news items that you should know before we go. Craig Counsell said that the finger fracture that we talked about earlier in the week with Kyle Tucker has healed. So
they also said that they found a second one and he played through them both and don't worry about it. It's all good. But,
I guess the in case you missed it part is he's back in the lineup on Thursday after a couple of days off. Cubs played well in that stretch. They're trying to take 4 of 5 from the Brewers in a matinee that will have taken place probably by the time you get to hear this.
First home run. So that was fun. He looks
That's
like
big boy power. That was opposite. It was a nice oppo shot too.
Yeah. So I think maybe they're doing this right. I think it is going to be a little bit hard on Casey to not have every day at bats, but he's doing well despite it.
But breaking him in nonetheless. So there's your update on Kyle Tucker, at least from the Cubs side. Finger apparently has healed. I want to talk about the Royals a little bit today, though. They're hanging around, and they're doing it in a way that I just didn't quite expect. If you said, who are the 2 guys in this team that have surprised you the most this year, I would say Maikel Garcia and Michael Wacha. Both have played at levels above what I expected. I mean, Garcia, there were reasons to be intrigued, but he played at a level last year that does not guarantee a player keeps an everyday job. When you post a 70 WRC plus and your defense is above average but not elite in terms of the overall value it creates, nothing's guaranteed. You could become a slick fielding backup and end up getting 450 plate appearances. Instead, he's an everyday guy. He's got a career high in homers already. He's striking out less. He's still running. Last year, he was 37 for 39. This year, he's 22 for 31. But completely different player by result. 300, 361, 468. Far above even a modest improvement. If you'd have told me Garcia's going to be better in 2024 or in 2025 than he was in 2024, I would have said, cool, 2023 is probably doable since he got the K rate down last year. What happened with Maikel Garcia, and is there something we can learn from what he's been able to do this year that might steer us to some interesting players for the future?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's only above average bat speed, but he's always hit the ball hard. So that was one reason that we liked him going into 2024. And he was kind of on our list of sleepers. I think one thing you might want to learn from this is actually kind of more of a nebulous thing, which is if you had somebody on your sleeper list and then he came out and was only okay, don't take him off your sleeper list. If he was terrible, you maybe reevaluate your position on that. But, some of the stuff that he did in 2023 that we liked was still there in 2024. He still made good contact. He still was a great defender. His hard hit rate went down, but it was still a decent hard hit rate. So and he stole 37 bags. So, even if he didn't do the breakout that he's done this year in 2024, don't put him in the do not draft list. Don't put him in the, I was wrong list. Sometimes it takes an extra year, The other thing I would say is that if somebody is able to maintain, mid 40s hard hit rates, even if their bat speed isn't great or their barrel rate isn't great, they're hitting the ball hard. They're putting the ball in play. They're going to have an above average, especially if they have wheels along with that. They're going to have an above average BABIP. If they can make contact along with that, then they're going to have good batting average. So it's just somebody that was set up to have a good batting average. I think he's added a little bit more patience, and that's something that happens naturally over time. You just swing less as part of the aging curve. So, I think it was a little bit about the breakout coming a year later than we expected. The breakout is also fairly muted. What's he going to end up with at the end of this year? He's going to basically be a guy who was the same guy as he was last year, except with a better BABIP. He's going to end up with 14 homers instead of 7. That sounds like he doubled his home run output, but still, it's only 14 homers, and he's going to end up with near 30 stolen bases. So to some extent, he's going to do everything he did last year with just a better BABIP, and You could have looked at last year and said, wow, he did actually kind of break out. He just had a 268 BABIP. So I don't know. I would just say that the biggest lesson for me is like, the do not draft list for you should be small, and you should be careful when you start putting players on it.
I'll take that. Yeah, the stick with him kind of plan, I guess, is what we should probably learn on this one. And I guess the other part of it, the BABIP fluctuation last year. Garcia had a 344 BABIP in 2023. Given how hard he hits the ball, that kind of tracks. The fact that he lowered his K rate and got such a worse result on BABIP is a little surprising. You could probably argue that some of the pitches he was striking out on before, he was making weak contact on, so you get a little bit of a dip there.
The hard hit went down, but the hard hit even last year was decent.
Right. So the expected BABIP on a 42% hard hit rate is probably a little higher than a 268, especially when you look at how he ran those previously. Yeah. So that might be the other learning is, okay, maybe there was some bad luck cooked in there that made that offensive season look a bit worse than it was. Maybe it was only slightly below average instead of well below average. Either way, it's a big part of, I think, why the Royals have been able to hang around this year. 42nd ranked roto hitter in the Fangraphs player rater this season, which it's average in speed and power, but really impressive season from him so far.
I'm just looking around at some guys that have really high hard hit rates and lower BABIPs. Juan Soto has a 256 BABIP, and a lot has been made of his batting average, which I think is just kind of ridiculous. But Ben Rice, he doesn't run really well, but he has a 20% strikeout rate, and he doesn't have like crazy batted ball tendencies, and he has a 55% hard hit rate. So there's somebody I would that I pick off of the heap in terms of like the batting average should be there. Junior Caminero has a 253 BABIP, and Joe Adele, who we may need to talk about a little bit more, has a 254 BABIP, and he hasn't run as well as he has in the past, but he does have some speed. And a guy like Eugenio Suarez, though, I think he's trying to put the ball in the air so much that I'm not necessarily projecting a great increase there. I don't know if there's somebody that maps perfectly to Maikel Garcia, but the guy that kind of sort of comes to mind is Joe Adele. I think that doesn't have to have a 254 BABIP.
Yeah. I think that's a good call. Probably a little higher because of healthier legs in 2026. I don't know if a lot's going to change as far as his approach and what he does as a hitter. I think maybe we're a little closer to fully understanding what he brings to the table in that regard, but that's the part of his game that I think has been a little bit off this year because of health. The pitching for the Royals, like Bubic is out for the year. That was a huge loss when it happened. Waka is getting good results despite a dip in his strikeout rate, down to a 17.7% K rate, so it's hard to believe in it. The Sierra's up in the 4.5 range for him. When I look at this team and I try to talk myself into them as an actual threat to make another run into October, I keep coming up short, and I guess part of that too has been the lengthy absence of Cole Reagans with the rotator cuff strain. Like, so much about their story a year ago was getting a really good health outcome top to bottom in that rotation, and they're not getting that this year, and somehow weathering the storm so far. We'll see what these next 5.5 weeks bring, but even though they're surging a bit and kind of sitting in that 20% range for playoff odds, do you think this is still a team that falls just a little bit short because of the way it's built and the injuries they've taken on?
Yeah, I mean they've had, last year they had some really good, and I'm going to use the word luck. Maybe they kept them healthy. Maybe they targeted people that had good health, but they had good health luck in the rotation. They really just had everyone pitch all year. And this year it's just been kind of the opposite. The nice thing is that in the meantime, they've been working on their pitching development. And I think somebody like a Cameron and a Bubic have to count as wins for Royals pitching development. So they've been able to do the kind of cheaper version of the Dodgers where you actually spend money and get Luga, and you spend money, you get Waka. And in the meantime, you're also trying to improve your internal options so that when the higher priced older guys go down, you have an option. I do feel like I lean towards where the numbers say this is going to go, is like they're going to have a season that ends around 500. They won't be in the playoffs. I think Cameron's going to come down to earth a little bit, but I also think Bergert, is more interesting than some of the models suggest as a guy with carry and a good sweeper. And Reagans is still working his way back. I don't think he's been declared out for the season. He threw a 35 pitch bullpen session on the 18th. And that he could be a shot in the arm for a team that is still, running Mike Lorenzen out there and may be suffering a little bit of a Noah Cameron regression right now. So if they have better luck next year and they go into the next season, Reagans, Lugo, Waka, with their young guys filtering up, maybe they sign one more guy there. They could sign a reliever. I'm not asking them to do a ton. The biggest thing, though, is the outfield needs to get better. I think Jack Caglione can be better for them going forward. I wouldn't be surprised they re-sign Mike Yastrzemski. They love him. But I don't understand. Like, I used to think that Royals hitting development was pretty good. But really, it's Bobby Witt and Maikel Garcia, who are very different players. And Vinny Pasquantino is getting there. Sal Perez. So I think they have made some strides in that. Why doesn't it work in the outfield? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's very strange.
They've run through so many guys out there, and they've all been pretty terrible. And maybe it's just where they put guys, that aren't that great, and they just keep trying all their different guys that aren't that great and being like, oh, it's not working. But also, where is like the better meat going into the grinder? Like, why haven't they, other than Jack, don't they have other high draft picks that should be percolating to the top, right? So there's still something missing. Maybe it's just hard to hit in Kauffman. We've talked about this a little bit. Tommy Pham had this idea that, every pitcher goes in, like pitches in the zone in Kauffman because they know they won't give up a homer. But I looked at zone rates by stadium and I couldn't prove that. But there's still a chance that like, not being able to hit a homer changes you. I mean, I remember Alex Gordon coming up and being like, I can hit homers, and then him being like, oh, I can't hit homers here. And he had to change to more of a line drive stroke. So maybe there is still some sort of disconnect between this is the best way to produce major league hitters. And then it's like, but are you producing the best major league hitters for Kauffman?
Right. And that's one of the more challenging places to do that. I think that's something we've learned over the last decade plus now, and they still haven't cracked it. But I think I wanted to bring them up because as an organization, they do something, they're still headed in the right direction. They're getting better results than you'd expect given those injuries. They've left themselves in a position to still be hanging around in September, which I thought if they got the same health outcome as last year, they might struggle to do as well as they did a year ago. And I've been wrong about that. So I think that's credit to them as an organization.
And you have to put the up arrow. Right. I think you have to put the up arrow on this team. Because you're going to say next year, you should have some better health outcomes just with the way the pendulum goes. And you're thinking that Jack's going to be better next year. And you're thinking that Vinny has another step maybe in him next year. And you've already established that Bobby and Maikel are parts of the middle of that order. So, if Yastrzemski's your 5 or 6 hitter, like you're just like, can we figure something out in center and left? Like, can we, come on, like you're wherever Jack doesn't play. So the problem with that, though, is center is just not a place to go shopping.
No, that's a tough one. A lot of teams develop their own center fielders. So you get to the market and have to pay a premium. You're getting someone that's probably going to be at the downside of their career more often than not. We've seen some successes of teams dipping their toes into that market, but it doesn't always go as well as you'd hope from the outset. Maybe it's trade. Maybe there's some clever way the Royals can get it done. We are going to go. A reminder, you can join our Discord with the link in the show description. Be sure to like this video if you watched on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already. We're closing in on a milestone. We'll hopefully hit 10,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel before the end of the year. So
this is episode 900, wasn't it?
Is it? We think it's 900, so huge. I mean, thanks to everybody who's made this happen. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this and many of those episodes together.
Confetti streaming down from the rafters.
I'm trying to get the confetti graphic to come up, and it's not happening, but we'll just do it for ourselves. But thanks to you for being a great co-host with me on this show throughout the years. We've had so many people that have worked with us over the years. Chris Welsh, Al Melchior a few years ago. Now Trevor May, Jed Lowry, Britt Giroli. So just a great crew that's made it possible. And we're closing in on 1,000 episodes. We'll get there sometime next year, but hopefully we'll get to 10,000 YouTube subscribers well before we hit that 1,000 episode mark. Thanks to your help. I don't know why I pointed at the camera, because the people who've already subscribed probably count as part of the people we have already. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Friday.
Thanks for listening.